All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another day of Saber Sims DFS office hours. It is Monday, November 28th of 2022, wrapping up week 12 of the NFL. Hope everybody had an awesome Thanksgiving. I know I had a good time, got to play a lot of DFS. Always a fun time of the year, getting basically two NFL main slates, a lot of other action over the weekend. We are going to get it kicked off with our weekly Max Challenge giveaway. For those of you who are new here, welcome. My name is Andrew, one of the coaches here at SaberSim. This is a show where we go over how to use the SaberSim app, answer any and all DFS related questions that come in the office hours channel in our Discord. Haven't had a show since Wednesday, so should have plenty of questions to get to today. Took a break for the holiday. Back here today, ready to rock and roll, ready to answer some questions. So I'm going to get the Max Challenge up on the screen here. We're 12 weeks in, about 2/3 of the way through the season. A lot of people still participating each and every week. Really happy to see it. So for those of you, who have been participating, we are getting closer to the end of the year, and all of our end of the year prizes. You play 10 weeks, you get the 2 Yeti cups and a free month. You play all 18 weeks, you get the cooler, the cups, 3 months of SaberSim, and an entry into our end of the season free roll. Still plenty of time to win a mini max and get the championship belt, get a free year of SaberSim. So keep going, 2/3 of the way through. Still got some time left, many main slates left. But that being said, we are going to go over to our wheel of names and get all of the people who participated this last week in here and do our spin for the free tickets to next week's mini max. I am going to get the names in here. Looks like we had 132 people participate this week. And, I posted a link to the Google Sheet that has all of the lists of participants. So anybody can check it out. Make sure their name is in there and on this wheel. So we are going to do the spin for the free tickets, and then we will announce the winner for the highest score for the week. So let's do the spin. Free tickets. Next week's mini max is going to J11.5. J11.5. Congratulations. The team will reach out to you and let you know you have won. Thank you for participating, and good luck next week. And now our announcement for the highest score this week was Eggs Any Style with a score of 213.8 points for 21st place in the mini max. Congratulations. You are going to get a free month of SaberSim, a free t-shirt, and an entry into our end of the season free roll. Another awesome week of Max Challenge in the books. Keep participating, and we will be right back here next Monday to talk about next week's mini max. But that being said, we are going to get SaberSim pulled up here, and we are going to get rolling with our questions for today. Gonna start with a question that came in the support channel. Good question right here. Want to knock this one out early. Then we will jump over to Discord. Then we will jump over to YouTube chat. See, Snowman is here. Snowman, I saw that you took down a showdown for the Thanksgiving slate for Buffalo. Congrats, Snowman. Glad to see you are still catching the show, still asking questions, and finding some success. So really good job there, and keep learning, keep winning. All right, question here from support said, I'm looking at NFL FanDuel contests, and I'm wondering why not just put correlation all the way up for large contests. Okay, really good question here. So we're gonna hop over to NFL. Let's go to FanDuel, and then we will go to the main slate that we just had yesterday. So if we come over here, got our contests, let's look at what the sliders are for the largest field, right? and we're gonna put max entry limit, max entrance. Come over here, check out manual mode. So our sliders are set to 449, correlation 4, ownership fade 4, sim diversity 9. And these are, the back tested sliders to what we have determined are the best slider settings based on our back tests. So, the question is, why not just crank correlation all the way up? So I really think it comes down to, DFS is a game of balance. I think that you have to balance correlation, balance ownership fade, manager exposures post build, risk management is that's really what sim diversity is. It's kind of like a risk management tool. The higher sim diversity is, the more players you're going to have in your player pool, the more kind of spread out your exposures are going to be as a byproduct of that. The lower your sim diversity is, the less players you're going to have in your player pool, the more concentrated your exposures are going to be. And that's kind of what you want when you're playing like a single entry, 1 to 10,000. You don't want as many players in your player pool. We don't really want to get to some of those lower projected plays that could have a ceiling outcome. We don't always need that in a single entry contest. That's why this sim diversity slider comes down. So I think that, just the way you're kind of coming at this question, I think correlation is important. I think stacking is important for sure. I mean, that is a key thing. That is what you will see when you run your lineups with this correlation. But correlation is not like an end all be all. There is definitely a point of diminishing return. So like what I'm saying is, your lineups could be pretty positive EV with it at this correlation value. But that does not mean that the higher you put it, the better your lineups are going to be. I think there is a point with the correlation slider specifically where once you start increasing it, more and more, your lineups then take a turn for the worst. And I would really strongly recommend leaving the correlation slider where it is. If you are concerned or want to make sure you are getting more stacks in your lineups, I would handle it in the stack types. I would say, if I wanted to value correlation more, I wouldn't handle it in the correlation slider. I would come in here and handle it in the stack types. Like maybe I don't want to play any, QB plus zeros. I always want a QB to have a pass catcher in the same lineup. So I think that's one way to take advantage of correlation, is more kind of in the stack types that you allow into your lineups, rather than just jamming the correlation slider up to try and maximize correlation. I would advise against that. But I think it's a good question and definitely something worth talking about. But just remember, DFS is a juggling act. I got my correlation ball, I got my ownership fade ball, I got my sim diversity ball, and I am sitting here trying to juggle all of those and maintain my balance and just create a good lineup portfolio overall. That's how I like to think about it. But good question there. We are going to jump over to Discord and get going over there. I see a couple questions coming in YouTube chat. Happy everybody is able to tune in today. So I got this question here from Deo, looks like, and said, if I have 150 lineups to make for the mini max and also 20 lineups to make for a 20 max entry contest, would it be a better idea to just make 170 lineups under the 150 setting instead of making 150 on the 150 setting and then 20 on the 20 max setting? This way I avoid duplicate lineups as well as get a more unique / diverse set of 170 lineups. Or is that not the best way to go about it? Thanks. Okay, really good question here. So if I had a 150 max contest and a 20 max contest, I would build 170 lineups. And the reason for that is because we suggest building a unique lineup for every unique entry you have. So if you are playing 200 lineups, you have 200 entries, under the entries tab, you upload your entries file, and this number is 200 up here. I would build 200 unique lineups, and whether, depending on what type of contest it is, if it's a single entry or 3 max, I would follow the DFS profit plan, which basically says to treat your 20 maxes and 150 maxes as like one build and your single entries and 3 maxes as another build. In that case, I would just run 2 builds, separate the 2, but make sure a unique entry goes into, or unique lineup goes into each entry, just to try and give myself more chances of finding that winning lineup and binking on any given day. The more times you duplicate, the more risk your portfolio kind of has, and you are just going at it with less shots on goal, basically with less unique lineups. So I think you're thinking about it the right way. I would, treat my 20 maxes and 150 maxes together, probably just choose the higher of the 2 settings. Really, really small change here. We see our correlation ownership fade at 4.4 for both the 20 max and 150 max. And our sim diversity went up 1 tick, went from 150 max to 20 max. So 448 slider settings for 20 max, 449 sliders for 150 max. Not a big difference there. I would just take the higher of the 2 and change my number of lineups in the bottom left corner to 170 if I'm playing a 150 max and a 20 max. So good question there. Gonna keep it rolling. Got a looks like a feature request here from Purple Hazy. So we'll just touch on this really quickly. Question says, have you guys ever thought about adding a column for the account owner's actual ownership of the player based on their entries on the projections tab and not just inside the entries section? It would make it a lot easier to have that info on the main screen when adjusting things around. Okay, so what this question is referring to, and I think I can probably demo this for NBA today. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go over to FanDuel right here. I am going to go and grab my entry file for NBA, and then I am going to upload it into SaberSim so we can talk about this. So let me get the entry file loaded up in here. Okay, I see the contests that I have entries for today. And what the question is referring to is this lineup exposure and entry exposure columns that you see in the entries tab. It will tell you, how many what percent of lineups you have a player in. And then if you happen to duplicate any of your lineups into multiple entries, it will also do a calculation for what percent of entries you have X player in. So the request is, hey, can I have these columns that show those players over here in the home screen as one of the column drop downs? So I will take this back as a feature request and let the team know that people are asking for it, and we will see if we can get that into the home screen at some point in the future. So good question there. Gonna keep it rolling. Gonna jot that one down. Had a question here from D in the Discord. Said, hello, what is the simplest way I can build a secondary stack in NFL or college football after building a QB +2 with a bring back or the like? Okay, so what I'm getting from this is that you want a QB +2 with a run back as well as a mini stack, which makes sense, is a common stack construction. So let's go back to the main slate over here. I think the easiest way to handle it is like if you know that you want a QB +2 with the run back no matter what, and maybe you're only building like 3 lineups, right? So I would just go into stack types. I would uncheck all the stack types using the mass uncheck button, and I see that I am blocking the screen. So I am going to move myself so we could see this. So what I did was I just came in here and used the mass uncheck all the stack types. I'm going to go down here to QB +2 with the run back. That's what the line 1 is. So that will make sure that that is the primary stack in all of my lineups. Then I would come in here and then I would go add a rule, and then I would say stack basic, and then I would say exactly 1. I would uncheck QB, and then I would say with exactly 1 And then I would also uncheck QB. So maybe you want to uncheck running back too, and you say like, use exactly one pass catcher with exactly one opposing pass catcher on the other team. So we're going to save this rule. It's right here and it is checked. We have the stack types in here as only QB +2 with a run back. So let's run a build and see if this works. So we're just going to run 500 lineups really quickly, and let's see if we are getting those mini stacks in there as well. So I am curious to see what this spits out, and then if we need to adjust the rule to get this, we will, but I'm pretty sure this is how you would do it. So let's let these lineups run. We're being really restrictive with the stacks that we are allowing into our build. So the build might take a little longer. So just be aware of that. And, I think 86 lineups just for the sake of the demo is plenty here. So we go into the stack types. Interesting. We're seeing a lot of no QB stacks here. So this might be a byproduct of the rule we set, because we're seeing a lot of our mini stacks are here, right? We have the Cortland Sutton and DJ Moore run back there. We are seeing, who else are we seeing here? It looks like we have a David. No, we did pass catchers only. So, okay, we have Njoku and Godwin. And then we have, where's another one? Tyreek Hill and Nico Collins. So our first rule worked. Okay. So I'm going to make a slight adjustment here. I'm going to set two rules. And then the first one is going to be an advanced stack. So I'm going to be QB equals 1, running back, wide receiver, tight end equal to 2, and then opposing team QB equals 0. I'm going to say wide receiver, tight end equals 1. So this will be our primary stack. QB equals 1, running back, wide receiver, tight end equals 2, opposing team, wide receiver, tight end equals 1. So we're going to save that. Okay, so that's our first advanced stack. I'm going to get rid of this basic stack. I'm going to do a new stack, and I'm going to do advanced again. And then I'm going to say QB equals 0. And then I'm going to say wide receiver, tight end equals 1. And then I'm going to go opposing team, wide receiver, tight end equal to 1. So that this way, I know that one, I have a primary stack of that we already set. And then this is a secondary stack with no QB allowed. So I should have 2 advanced stacks here. And then let's try it with this setting on. Now I think this will definitely work. So going to run some lineups. Might take a minute, which is totally okay. And then we are going to keep it rolling. Person asked for, NFL or college football. Not sure how this would work for college football since we don't have Sims for it, but I think this is definitely viable for NFL. So, okay. Lineups ran successfully. No conflicting logic. We're getting 100% QB +2s with a bring back. And then we have 97% 1-1s. So I think this works now. So we'll see Kyler Murray with Hopkins and Connor with Allen. And then we are seeing Corey Davis against Cole Kmet. So boom, that works. And then, okay, so we can see right here. So stack QB +2 with a run back, secondary stack 2-1, secondary stack 1-1. So having all of those secondary stacks in here, we are certain, and we're seeing Corey Davis Kmet with our Murray. We are seeing Debo with Taysom Hill. So this definitely worked. So if you set these 2 advanced stacks, which I'm just going to put up on the screen in case, somebody's watching this, they want to come in here, they want to screenshot it to apply it to their own build. So it's a stack advanced. These are the values you want to set. QB equals 1, running back, wide receiver, tight end equals 2, opposing team, wide receiver, tight end equals 1. That is your first stack for your QB. And then your second stack for your mini stack is QB equals 0, wide receiver, tight end equals 1, opposing team, wide receiver, tight end equals 1. If you do those two things, that should allow it. You won't have to mess with the stack types at all. You can leave all of these checked, as well as the secondaries as well. So that is how you write those two rules. Glad we were able to work through that and figure it out on stream for anybody who wants to do that. Okay, I see a question from the Flash. It looks like that is more of a support question. I am going to copy this over to support and let the support team get back to you, Flash, but didn't want you to think I was ignoring you there. Okay, and gonna keep rolling here. Our next question was from, hold on really quickly. Let me just make sure the team knows where this came from. And then now we will keep it rolling. Next question came in from Slowmo3210 in the Discord. Question reads, for NBA, if I create a group of low-owned players, will the ownership fade slider still build lineups with other low-owned players? Ultimately, want to make sure that I'm not doubling down on low-owned players and building a bad lineup pool if I'm using a low-owned group. What would be the best way to use the builder? Okay, good question here. So let's talk about ownership fade first and foremost. How does ownership fade work? Let's go over to NBA actually so we can see what the values are for NBA. Got a 10-game slate tonight, and let's see what these values are at like the highest contest settings. So about a 3 ownership fade, which we determine is like a moderate ownership fade. How this works, we are going to build all your lineups and randomly sample the sims, and then we will provide a multiplier to individual players. So we are treating players on a position by position basis. And basically, if you are higher owned, you are kind of getting like taxed. And if you are lower owned in a position group, you are getting a bump in a sense. So just know that like the higher ownership fade is, the more ownership a player, the higher the ownership, the projected ownership value is, that player is getting treated worse than a player with a lower ownership fade. So that is basically what ownership fade is doing. I think that, if you are coming in here and maybe you're taking like, these 5 players are all under 10%, right? So I'm going to put, these, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Tyrese Halliburton, Donovan Mitchell, De'Aaron Fox, and Trae Young in a group, and I'm going to say use at least one from this group. And, I come in here, I add a group rule manual. I just come in and I check these players in, and I say use at least one. We save the rule. Now I have a quote-unquote low-owned player group. So SaberSim, with ownership fade being up, is still going to, try and get to some of these more lower owned players as opposed to playing, Jordan Clarkson maybe, but it kind of depends how he grades out in the sim. So, not to say that you won't get to any Jordan Clarkson at 33% owned. He is probably a really good play tonight. I haven't seen what the injury news is. Maybe, Lauri Markkanen is out. But basically, ownership fade is going to tax players like Jordan Clarkson and value players more like Fox and Trae Young the higher it gets set. So that's kind of what ownership fade is doing. I think if you want to value lower owned players, I don't think it's wrong to set a group and say, hey, these are the group of players that I want to have at least one from in my lineups. I think that, is there some double counting going on there? Maybe a little bit. I would rather write these players down and see how they come up in your exposures post build. So, let's just like do a demo. Alexander, Halliburton, Mitchell, Fox, and Young. And then I'm going to jot these 5 players down. These are the guys that I want to get to. I am going to just trash this rule so it doesn't affect anything. And then we are going to come in here, run 500 lineups, see how they're grading out. I think that if you can handle things post build, I always think that's better than giving the builder inputs because you have more of an effect on the sims in that scenario. But let's run 500 lineups. Maybe we're only playing at 20 max, and I'm going to go into this alt tab, and then I'm going to start looking. Alexander, okay, we're getting none of him. And then in the pool, let's see what we're getting from him in the pool. Only about 4%. We're getting Halliburton, 0% as well. Mitchell, 0%. Fox, 0%. And Young, not in the pool. And then I want to see what our Clarkson exposure is. Clarkson, we're about matching. Okay. So, we just saw we're getting no exposure to the 5 guys that you want. I think in that scenario, that is the first step I would take to doing this. It's okay, can I get the exposure I want post build? If the answer is no, then I think it makes sense to come in and set the rule that we just set. But I would at least try to do that first before coming in and making the rule. Because if you can build a pool and, maybe you see you can't get the exposure, then maybe, you could build 1,500 lineups, or you could build 5,000 lineups if you're on the pro plan. I would come in here, increase the pool size, try this exercise again. Doesn't take too long to build lineups and see if you can manage it post build. But, take those first steps and then go and create the rule rather than just do the rule right off the bat. You let the sims be a little more organic and kind of work with the sim outputs rather than forcing in players into the build. So that's my advice on how to do it. I think that, ultimately, we want to allow you to get the pieces into your lineup that you want. And I think that setting this manual group is a fine way to do it. So my best advice is try and get the builder to give you what you want organically. Then if you cannot, then go and start to set rules, increase projections, etc. So good question there. I think there's a sequence and kind of a workflow that is best practice. And I think that is exactly what we just demoed. Okay. Gonna keep rolling here. Question from TBK. TBK said, good morning, Andrew. By chance, can you go over both the NFL main slate and NBA process for FanDuel lately after doing a test build? I've had exposures to some players that don't produce. How can I get more players that produce in my lineups? Okay, so, what I will say is that, if you are building lineups and you are playing some of the largest field stuff, this sim diversity slider is going to increase and allow more players into your lineup. It sounds like you are getting players that you are not comfortable with in your lineups, especially for NFL. So I would do a couple things, and I would do it pre-build pretty much. So one is I would come into FanDuel, NFL. I would see where my min projection filter is set to. It looks like it's set to 3. I would come down here and scroll down. I would sort by projection, and then I would come down here, sort by projection, see who the players are at this cutoff, and then determine if you want these players in your lineup or not, and then make a determination about whether or not you want to change this filter. I mean, I know that Amir Abdullah scored a touchdown for the Raiders yesterday, but, you probably still didn't need to play him in order to win. So I think that, looking at who these players are and saying is this somebody I really want to play? What is their upside outcomes? And, I know Jordan Akins is another person who had a good day, but, for every one player that has a good day at these ranges, there are probably 5 other players that didn't do good in that range. And we can kind of see that, Amir Abdullah, I forgot we have the actuals here, scored 13, but Harrison Bryant, 1.9, got a 0 from Hills, 0 from Anderson, 0 from Shai Smith. and then a couple points for some of these other guys. And then you find another guy like Jordan Akins with a 12-point game. So, that's about like 10 or so players where 2 of them had over 10 points. And you have to ask yourself, like, one, do I want to allow these type of scenarios into my lineups? And 2, do I even think I need the 13 from this minish salary guy to win? And I think that, that there's like a trade-off there and something you need to ask yourself. If you're like, what, I don't even think I needed Akins and Abdullah in the lineup to win. I could have got there with other running back pieces like P. Ryan, like Rashad White. And so I don't even want to allow these players into my lineup. Or maybe you want to handle it like on positional, like, what, I'm okay allowing lower projected guys in the tight end because tight end position tends to be really thin as opposed to the running back. Maybe I don't want to do that for the running backs. I think that, you can kind of mess with these projection filters and, increase this to 5 and see what this, who gets in these lineups now and where that cutoff is at. Maybe you're a lot more comfortable with the bottom of your range being guys like Dotson, Kmet, Hubbard, Hilliard. So I think that, doing some pre-build player curation is what is going to prevent you from seeing some of these pieces that you really don't want to see. And I would highly recommend handling them kind of differently. Like if I were to increase this projection filter, I would leave off defenses because defenses tend to be really variant, and any defense can like have a pick six or a fumble recovery for a touchdown on kind of any given day and handle it differently. So maybe you want like a higher one for your position players. Maybe you want to leave tight end out and set a different one with min projection at 3 for only tight ends. And so, you're saying like, hey, I'm okay leaving lower scoring tight ends in, but I do want to create the filter for my running backs and my wide receivers at a higher value than my tight ends. I think that makes some sense too. So I would advise you to do some more pre-build player curation and kind of find out where the bottom of your range is at. And then I would advise you to possibly treat this differently for your diversifiers and for your elevators. Maybe in your elevators, you want to be a little even more stringent on what players are in your player pool. For your elevators where you're only building, maybe like 1 to 20 lineups, depending how many single entries and 3 maxes you are playing. But I think that, taking a step and doing some more player pool curation in step 1 pre-build will lead to you having less of these players that you do not like in your lineups. So that's my best advice there. This exact same process can be taken for NBA, which I know you also mentioned in this question. So I think it applies pretty much across the board there. So good question. Gonna keep it rolling here. Got a question from Studewood, and he said, how do I enter these rules in SaberSim? Max 1 defense per game, max 1 kicker per game. Okay, this looks like a showdown question. Gonna hop over to DraftKings. We can demo this for the night showdown that we have tonight. So what I would do, I would come into lineup rules. I would go to a group rule. I would go to a manual rule. Since in showdown, players are only treated as captain and flex, their actual positions are not taken into account. So what I would do is I would say use no more than 1, and then I would just check in the defenses. So I would check them in the captain spot, and then I would check them in the flex spot. So I'm checking in the Colts and Steelers in the captain and flex. That's for technical players. And then I would say use no more than 1. I would hit save. And then I would do the same exact thing for my kickers and say group manual, use no more than 1. Check them in the flex. And then check them in the captain. I would make the rules differently. That way I basically have 2 rules, 1 for kickers, 1 for defenses. And then now it won't use more than 1 in every single lineup. So that is how you do that. Studewood, let me know if you have any follow-up there. Another question here from TBK. Said, hi, Andrew. I have another question. If I'm setting exposures to players based on the pool column on the right side, am I building them wrong? Okay, good question. So to answer your question straight up, I do not think there is a right or wrong answer. So, are you building it wrong? My answer is no. That is one way to build lineups. I'm not saying it's the right way, but it's not the wrong way. There are so many different paths to victory, and I've talked to a lot of people and answered a lot of different questions from people who build their lineups differently. Ultimately, a lot of different paths to victory. I don't think you are wrong with following pool exposure, especially if you are treating every lineup in your pool as viable. Some people want to play closer to, the exposures at the top of their range. And that's because, maybe they're valuing Saber score more. Maybe they're using a custom metric and want to play the top lineups based on their metric. So I don't think it's wrong to play closer to the pool exposure or play more concentrated. I think it is a personal choice. In my experience, the more min uniques you set, the closer to pool exposure you are going to get, mostly because you are going to be using more of your pool, and therefore your exposures are going to get spread out and closer to these pool exposure values. So, if we were to demo this, I'm using 4 min unique players, I'm using 5 min unique players, and then hold on, I'm going to just resort this really quickly. So at 5 min unique players, let's see how many we can get to. Okay, it looks like 5 was the max. So at 5, exposures start to go down, get a little more spread out. You will see them get kind of closer to the pool exposures. It's a little subjective, but it is just something I've noticed, as opposed to when min unique players is 1 and you got a lot more concentrated exposures. So nothing wrong with doing it that way. I think that is something that min uniques kind of gets to eventually, the more spread out you get. But, no right or wrong answer. A lot of paths to victory for that question. All right. Question here from Cashman51. Said, is late swap still adversely affecting min uniques, or did I miss something? Okay, good question here. So just so everybody is aware, we are in the very near future, I can't put a date on it yet, but it is in testing at the moment. We are going to be allowing for late swap pools. So right now, when a slate locks and you go to late swap, you can only rebuild each lineup one time. If I have 50 lineups, it is going to rebuild 50 lineups and only rebuild the lineup one time. Excuse me. We are coming up with a new release where in late swap, you are going to be able to have a pool of late swap lineups similar to how you have it pre-build. So at the moment, you are not able to adjust min uniques in late swap. That will be changing with the late swap pool. When we have the late swap pool available, you will be able to go into the late swap pool and adjust min uniques, adjust player exposures. It will look really similar to how it looks in the pre-build process, pre-late swap. So we're really excited about that. It is still in testing, still some kinks, hoping to have that out pretty soon here, and stay tuned more for that. But at the moment, you cannot adjust min uniques when using late swap. I think late swap still outweighs min uniques, but it will be nice to have a little bit of the best of both worlds with the late swap pool. So that feature is coming. Stay tuned for updates there. Should be out pretty soon here. So really excited about that. But I just wanted to let everyone know. Okay. Snowman had a quick question. Looks like somebody answered it for me, but I'm just going to touch on this really quickly. Snowman said, I changed my avatar on DraftKings, but it doesn't show it on the main page. It does show it on my account. Any advice? Someone said clear your cache in the DK app. I know another solution has been to uninstall the DK app and then re-download it from the App Store as well. So another one there. All right, question from Manny. Manny said, hi, Andrew. Can you go over your process for NBA for selecting core players? Okay, good question here. So I am not a like core player type of person, but I think there are ways to kind of understand who SaberSim likes and what the kind of natural core you get from SaberSim is. So one thing that we've talked about, run a test build and see who the highest exposed players are in your pool and in your 150 lineups. Apologies, everybody. I'm a little sick. So, I would come in here, sort by pool, see who these top players are, and kind of make a cutoff. For me, just looking at this, I would probably make it around like this 40-ish% range. There's like a kind of a drop to 36, a drop to 30. You could maybe include Tatum in there. Pretty close in my opinion. So I would treat like these like 4 to 5 players as like what SaberSim is deeming as like my highest exposed plays or like my core plays. Something we've talked about in the past is, somebody's asked, how do I take, the players that I want to use as a core and incorporate that with the players that SaberSim wants to use? The solution that we kind of came up with was, take your group of 3 to 4 players, take SaberSim's top exposed, 4 to 5 players, put all 9 of those players in a group role and say use at least 3. And that is one way to incorporate the players that you have figured out you want to target through your own pre-slate lock research and the players that SaberSim wants to be highly exposed to, and kind of tell SaberSim to treat the players that you want at the same level that it is treating the players that it wants to play. That's like one way of kind of incorporating your own research into a rule to use with SaberSim's highly exposed players. Shouldn't be a lot of conflict there since SaberSim already wants to use those players. So, as far as like a core, not something that I like to use, mostly because I don't like to restrict the builder in that way. But I think there are ways of kind of understanding who the highest exposed players are and how to work them into your lineups. So those are my thoughts on like finding a core, run some research builds, run some optimal builds, maybe some 0-0-10s, do some deep dives into injury news and see who could value if players are out, etc. Always come in here, check the value pre-lock and see why certain players are value. I'm assuming CJ McCollum is still out, which is why Jose Alvarado is still value, and his salary has been ticking up slowly as McCollum continues to be out. But just some food for thought there, and let me know if you guys have any follow-up. All right, question here from AR Razorback says, hi, Andrew. Still learning or developing a late swap process for NFL main slates, but yesterday I did late swap, no injuries, and in the end, my lineups that changed did worse than if I had not late swapped. I used the same sliders as the before lock build, but after adjusting my exposures in my build, I did not send those home. Is that the step I missed with late swap? Okay, good question here. So I will say that late swap pools should solve this, where basically, you are late swapping and trying to take advantage of new sims, but you are not able to make adjustments. So with late swap pools, you will be able to go in and set min uniques and adjust min and max exposures. So I think that is going to really make late swapping in NFL for that second window a lot more viable, even with no injuries. I would say like at the moment, if that doesn't come out before next weekend, what I will say is that, if there are no injuries and there are no big reasons to swap, I think that, you kind of have to ask yourself, do I want to get away from all the work that I did in my pre-build lock with exposures, with min uniques, and like kind of give that up for late swapping, for taking advantage of new sims? Or do I want to value that higher than the new sims with no injury news, where the adjustments being made to the sims are kind of more minor and not as like big impact? I would say like, if injury news breaks, that's really high impact and value can open up and you could really take advantage of that. But if you are late swapping just to late swap, I think that, you have to do that understanding that you are giving up the control of the mini uniques, the control of the minimax exposures, and your lineups can look different from what you had originally done. So I think that there's definitely a trade-off there. I think late swap pools solve that issue, which is why we are really excited about it. But if it were me and if there were no injury news, I would probably not late swap until we get late swap pools, just to keep the integrity of all the work I did pre-lock. So hopefully late swap pools come out really soon and you can get the best of both worlds there. But for the time being, I would definitely weigh those factors and decide if it is worth it to late swap in that scenario where there is no major breaking news. Okay. Looks like we have Mark asked a question here. Did office hours move back to 2 p.m. Eastern? Yes, office hours did move back to 2 p.m. Eastern. We've been on this window for about, I'd say, like maybe like 2 or so-ish weeks. We will be staying at this time slot. We figured out that it is the best time slot, tried out some different things, and ultimately returned to the 2 p.m. Eastern window. We tend to like this window a lot. So, did it move back permanently? The answer is yes. Okay, got a question, a follow-up here from Slow-Mo. Slow-Mo said, appreciate the answer, and I think it makes a lot of sense to let the Sims do the work. My follow-up would be, if the player pool is in the lineup pool, but not the final 20 lineups, how should I go about choosing settings / their exposures? Should I just match the pool? Okay, so just a refresher, Slow-Mo's original question said, if I create a group of low-owned players, will the ownership fade slider still build lineups with other low-owned players? Ultimately, want to make sure that I'm not doubling down on low-owned players and building a bad pool. If I'm using the low-owned group, would it be best? What would be the best way to use the builder? So the follow-up was, my follow-up would be, if the player is in the lineup pool, but not the final 20 lineups, how should I go about choosing / setting their exposure? Should I just match the pool? Okay, good question. I don't think there's a right answer, and it really comes down to how important is it for you to have these players in your lineups. You said you're building 20 lineups here, and it's kind of like, I can't really give you like a wrong or right answer, or like some kind of arbitrary number like, oh, always have 10% of this player in your lineups. Like, it really comes down to like, okay, I've built with a bigger pool. I've built a bigger number of lineups. I've put in the rule. Maybe I've adjusted the projection. SaberSim still doesn't want to give me any of them. What do I do? And it really comes down to a personal decision. You have to ask yourself, like, do I really want to play this player at all costs? Or do I want to listen to the builder and say, I've put in a rule, I've added the projection, the builder still does not like them. And for me in that instance, that might be a reason to kind of get off of that player. I know I've done that myself. It's like, okay, maybe I want to value this player a little more. Maybe I think they get closer to their 75th percentile outcome, and I increase the projection, and the builder is like still saying, nope, just, not a player that we want to play. And it could be for reasons beyond our, that I'm not able to compute in my head, right? That's what the builder does. It manages salary, ownership fade, fits in all of these pieces and works them all into the build to give you high upside lineups. And just due to those facts, the builder is like saying that, this piece just doesn't really fit. And if that's the case, I think it's up to you at that point to really say, like, you know what, I at least want X% of my lineups to have this player. And as long as they're in your pool, we can go and find them. That's like what building a bigger pool allows you to do. You're building 20 lineups, but you have 500 at your disposal. You can come in here and set the min exposure to as many players as you want, as long as the builder can meet those requirements. It's tough. And that's like the back and forth that you kind of play. You're giving the builder your inputs. The builder is giving you feedback. You're up to you to decide how you want to handle that feedback and whether or not you think it is worth acting upon. So that's my best advice is, ask yourself how much having exposure to a certain player matters to you, and kind of make your final decision based on whatever that answer is to you. So really not a wrong or right answer there. definitely a personal decision. So maybe not the answer you're looking for, Slow-Mo, but it's the best answer I got. And let me know if you have any more follow-up. Happy to continue to talk about it. Okay, scrolling down here. It looks like that was the last question in the Discord. We are going to be jumping over to YouTube chat now. So happy to jump over to YouTube chat, make our way on over here. Okay, Michael Wilkerson said, can you show me a good NBA process to start with? I could show you an awesome starting point, and I am going to show you that on our YouTube channel. So if you go over to our YouTube channel, couple cool resources for you. You go to videos. You go to playlists. We have this How to Beat NBA DFS in 2022, a video with Max Steinberg talking about his NBA DFS process. We have older videos, NBA Daily Fantasy. You can come in here. You can check these out. A bunch of videos that we have done in the past based on talking through NBA strategy there. If you go over to our Office Hours channel, go to View Full Playlists, a couple of videos that I have done. If you scroll down here, walking through an NBA process, and then all things NBA ahead of tip-off of the 2022 season. I think a good way to kind of find these videos, if you don't know where they are, just come into our YouTube channel, come up to the top, and then type in NBA. This will show you all. It'll just, take you right to all of our NBA content, and you can find videos, all the videos that we just pointed out are all right here. I think that is the best way to kind of do some research on our YouTube and find videos for content that you are specifically looking for. So I would take advantage of that. Check those videos out and then come back here if you have any more direct questions. But I think that is an awesome place to start. All right. Joe said, is there a way I can set a rule that allows two players to be in the same lineup, but cap the exposure of them in that same lineup? Okay. So it looks like you're trying to set a rule where it's like, hey, use these two players in 50% of my lineups. There is not a good way to do that. If you were to come in here and set a group manual rule, and then you want to put Alvarado and Noel in a lineup and say use exactly two, this will apply to 100% of the lineups in your build. So not really a good way to only apply that to a percentage of the pool. What I would do is I would kind of handle it in the post-build filtering. This is the best way to handle it at the moment. You could hit the little magnifying glass on Alvarado. This will show you all the lineups with Alvarado. You could look at the lineups in your top 20 or in your entire pool. So this is saying we have 16 of 20 lineups with Alvarado in our top 20 that we're going to take with us into our contest. And there are 239 lineups out of the 500 that also have Alvarado. You can see what players are in these lineups. The exposures will adjust when you start filtering. So out of the 16 lineups that I have Alvarado, 13 of them have Zion as well. So if this is like too much for me, I can also click Zion. And then what I would do is I would scroll down and start deleting lineups that are at the bottom until you get to the number you are comfortable with. So maybe you only want, 8 lineups where they're used together. So I could just trash, the point of trashing off of the bottom is that you are deleting the lower Saber score lineups and keeping the higher Saber score lineups where they are played together. That's why we scroll down to the bottom and delete from there. Now, if I look, I have, 13 lineups with Alvarado and I have 10 of them with Zion. So it seems like they're being used together a lot. But, I think eventually in a roadmap, it would be nice to be able to say like, show me lineups with Alvarado and then show me lineups with Zion and then cap their exposure together to, X%. So that is something that we definitely want to build in the future. But for the time being, you will definitely have to handle that in the post-build filtering, which I wish I had a better answer for you, but that is the one way to handle it at the moment. All right. Scrolling down here, got a question from Dual Threat. Said it is nearly always the same people at or near the top of contests. Clearly, they have a beat on something. Any thoughts on what the missing link is. Okay, good question. So first and foremost, what I want to say is that the players that you are seeing at the top of the contest consistently are probably entering the most often. So like they're maxing out every contest that they're playing. They're probably playing a ton of contests and have a lot of action on any given day. So, the more you enter, the more often you're going to end up at the top of those contests is like kind of something I think that gets missed. You see them at the top a lot, but you don't see how many entries they have or like how many entry fees they have on any given day. And that number gets like really, really big. So like, that's like the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that, by playing a lot of entries, they are able to get a lot more shots on goal and probably get a lot more diverse, have a lot more unique lineups in play. So I really don't think there's a secret ingredient. I really think that it comes down to, having a lot of unique entries, having a lot of unique lineups, and the people that you're seeing at the top have probably been playing DFS for a really long time and have built up their bankroll over many years. And I think that, continuing to exercise bankroll management, continuing to follow the DFS profit plan, and hopefully having those binks yourself will allow you to grind up those leaderboards and have more contests in play, more lineups in play, more entries on any given day over time. So I think that, DFS is a marathon, not a sprint. Continue to do the right things to maintain your bankroll and get those big wins and grow the bankroll and have more entries over time. And hopefully one day that could be you. So no secret ingredient there, just a long-term game that we are all trying to play. All right. Next question from Chris. Chris said, what is the difference between adjusting a player's projection in the home screen and adjusting it post-build? Does it affect which sims are used to build lineups? Continued, I noticed the exposures update real time when updating player projections post-build. How is it calculating this? Okay, good question. So if I were to adjust projections in the home screen, what would happen is that I am adjusting a player's range of outcomes. For every sim where Jose Alvarado scores 30 points, if I increased his projection by 2 points, now in that sim, he scores 32. And that is similar across the board. For every 40, he now has 42. So those are like pre-build inputs that you are giving to the builder. If you adjust him in the post-build, what is going to happen is that SaberSim is going to take the new projection that you are giving him and then resort the lineups based on Saber score with him at this new projection. So since you are changing this, we are not rebuilding the lineups. We are only resorting the lineups, and Saber score is basically rerunning with this new projection, but all the lineups are staying the same. And then now we are resorting them with this new projection. So that is why you get more exposure to a certain player by doing this post build. You're technically not affecting the sims because the sims have already ran and the projections have already been pulled, but you are telling Saber score like, hey, this player scored more now, and that affects the percentiles, that affects the projected score, etc. So Saber score will now recalculate and probably give you more lineups with this player in it. So that is how that works. All right, Jones Metal said, for DK Showdown or FanDuel single game, I'd like to set up rules such as make sure to include a QB and pass catcher and an opposing pass catcher, or for example, no more than 3 running backs. Can this be done regardless of which ones are the MVP? Okay, good question. So if I were to go to NFL, I'm just going to demo this for DraftKings. So, no more than 3 running backs. I'm going to start with that one. That one's a fairly easy one. What I would do is I would go to group, manual, use no more than 3. And then I would just come in here and check in the running backs. And then I would check them in the captain. And then I would go and check them in the flex. Highly doubt you're going to get to very much Benny Snell or Zach Moss or TJ or Derek Watt in the captain, but you never know. So I would check those 6 players in the captain, and then I would check those 6 players in the flex. and then make sure that we are all set there, and then hit use no more than 3. So boom, that is one rule. So that would be our first rule for this question. And then the bigger rule was say, I'd like to set up rules such as make sure to include a QB and pass catcher and an opposing pass catcher. Okay. So then I would come in and do a new rule, which this one's going to get kind of interesting here. So I wonder if I could do an advanced. No. So what I would say is I would probably do an if-then rule. And then I would say if at least one. So if I'm saying, if I'm using a quarterback, Kenny Pickett, Matt Ryan in the captain or the flex, then I would say must use at least, this is interesting. Make sure to include a QB and pass catcher and an opposing pass catcher. So this is pretty hard to do in my opinion. So you could say, if I'm using at least one of these guys, and maybe I want to do it on like a team by team basis. So maybe I want to just do it for Matt Ryan and then do a separate rule for Kenny Pickett. So I was saying if I'm using Matt Ryan in the captain or flex, then I want to use, and I would pick what players I want to use. Maybe I only want to do a handful like Pittman, Campbell, Pierce. And then I would come into the flex and then say Pittman, Campbell, and Pierce. So that way I'm saying, if I'm using Matt Ryan in the captain or flex, then I want to use at least one of his primary pass catchers as well and make that one rule. So then you can make a rule like that. So it's saying, if at least one of the Matt Ryans, then use one of his pass catchers. You could probably make a second rule and then say, do the same thing. And then if at least one, and then say Matt Ryan in the flex or Matt Ryan in the captain, then use at least one. And then you could pick the pass catchers from the opposing team. So like use at least one Freiermuth, Deontay Johnson, or George Pickens. And then you could also, put that in the captain as well. Yeah, that's probably how I would do this. There might be some conflicting logic here, but let's try this. So I have now set 2 rules. So first rule is if Matt Ryan in the captain or flex must use at least one of his pass catchers. And then if Matt Ryan in the captain or flex must use at least one pass catcher from the opposing team. I also have a rule in here for no more than 3 running backs. I am interested to see what these lineups look like. So let's build some lineups and see how this comes out. Lineups are building, so it doesn't look like the logic is conflicting at all. So I am pretty interested to see what we get. Okay, let's open this up so we can see what these lineups look like. Okay, so I am mostly interested in my Matt Ryan lineups. So here I'm getting Matt Ryan with Pittman in the flex with pass catchers. Same thing, Paris Campbell. Let's look in the pool. Paris Campbell with Deontay Johnson. Paris Campbell with Freiermuth. So these are all the players that we put in. Pittman with Johnson. So I think that, to do what you're asking, I think we just kind of demoed that. So it was 3 rules. One was no more than 3 running backs, which we could see we did it with a manual rule. And then to achieve our Matt Ryan with a pass catcher and an opposing pass catcher, we did 2 separate Matt Ryan rules. One manual rule with the Indy pass catchers, and then one manual rule with the Steelers pass catchers. So that is how I would handle that. And let me know if you have any follow-up. Okay, Snowman said, thank you. It worked. Awesome. Glad to hear that. This is our last question for the day that I am seeing. If anybody else has any more questions, get them in now. Going to hit this question from Michael. Said, do you think it's bad to be sending exposures to half players, step 3 for NBA. Okay. So my opinion, and this is the way I like to build my lineups. I like to let min uniques set the majority of the exposures. And then I like to come in and add my 2 cents on a handful of players after I have basically maxed out my diversity. So, maybe I want to get to like 5 min uniques. And it looks like I'm getting to that. At 6 min uniques, I cannot do it. I only have 13 lineups available. So I'm at 5 now, right? Okay. That is like the most organic exposure adjustments you can get. Now I want to say, okay, well, you know what? I did want, 25% of my lineups to have LeBron James. So then now I come and hit my 25 to LeBron, hit apply, see what comes out of that. If I am still able to have lineups in here where I'm able to meet my minimum lineups and my min uniques, great. Awesome. I think that you could probably only do this for a handful of players before you probably run out of lineups. So like, let's say I wanted to continue to do this. Oh, no, I want more Kevin Durant too. Oh, you know what? I want more Zach LaVine too. And then I'm going to do this until I break it. Maybe Trey Murphy, and I'm only doing incremental, but you can see like you can do it. Okay, unable to meet exposures. Now at this point, you have to determine, are my exposure adjustments more important to me than maintaining my min uniques, or are my min uniques more important than my exposure adjustments? Because at this point, if I were to decrease my min uniques, I could probably get the exposures that I was asking for. But if I want to maintain my min uniques, then I'm probably going to have to dial back this exposure adjustment. So it's like at that point, you have to determine what is more important to you, those exposure changes or the min unique players between the lineups. So definitely a personal question, but like that is the question. And that is like the intersection where you need to determine if you want to go right or if you want to go left, and how you want to go about that. And like, there's no right or wrong answer. It's how you want to build your lineups and how you want your lineups to look post build. But I think there is some ways to still get min uniques and make some exposure adjustments, maybe just not too many. So there's definitely a trade-off there at some point, but that's how I would think about it. All right. Question here from John said, for that, I think it would be useful to have the option for an if-then with like 2 secondary groups in the same rule. Otherwise, you have to do it as you just showed. Yeah, I think like the biggest issue is that for Showdown specifically, a lot of people are still viewing players as quarterbacks, receivers, running backs, but DraftKings is treating them as captain or flex. So it's really hard to build a positional rule for Showdown when DraftKings is not looking at them as their actual position. So I think that's where it gets a little funny and where we have to use these workarounds by building multiple rules to kind of still treat the players as what their actual positions are, as if they were on a classic slate. So kind of a small nuance there. Maybe we could build something in the future that solves that, but I think for the time being, that is the best way to do that. Follow up from John. So that being said, everybody, we had a lot of questions today. As expected, no show for a couple days with the break. We will be right back here tomorrow. As always, if you are not in the Discord, there is a link in the description below to get joined up. Get in there, talk some DFS in the channels. A lot of awesome conversations happening in there every single day. If you are not signed up with SaberSim, also a link to a 7-day, no strings attached free trial. Get in and check out what SaberSim is all about. All of these awesome features that we have, that we are continuing to build. Really looking forward to the late swap pools and just continuing to grow the app, grow our user base. So that being said, thank you. I'm Andrew, one of the coaches here at SaberSim. Do this show 5 days a week, 2 p.m. Eastern. We will be right back here tomorrow. Until then, take care and good luck.